All right. I'd like to go ahead and call the July 27th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting open for business. And can we get a roll call, please?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Chairman Dibble,
Present.
Vice Chairman Schrader,
Here.
Commissioner Zarguni,
Present.
Commissioner Miller is currently absent, Commissioner York will be absent, Commissioner Gonzalez,
Here.
Commissioner Mandel,
Here.
Commissioner Salazar Garza,
Here.
and Commissioner Munoz.
Here.
Quorum established.
All right. At this time, I would like to open up the general public comment period for this meeting. If you've got a comment on a specific agenda item, you will have an opportunity to do that later in the meeting. But if you had a general comment, you can do that now. Okay, with there being none, I will close the public comment hearing and move for approval of absences. I believe the last meeting, Commissioner Mandel, Commissioner Salazar Garza were absent.
Make a motion that we approve Commissioner Mendel and Salazar Garza's absences.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second on approval of absences. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Moving on to item number 4, approval of minutes from the July 13th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting.
Make a motion that we approve the July 13th Planning Commission meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on to item number 5, number 2, we have a briefing on the West Side Area Development Plan.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Annika Yankee. I'm a planning manager with the city's planning department, and I've been the project manager for the West Side Area Development Plan. Let me try to turn this. Do you know how to turn it full screen real quick? Window. View, right?
It's read or full screen mode. Down.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. There we go. Okay. Okay, so during today's briefing, I'm going to give you an overview of the plan itself, but also the process to get here. And the reason why I'm here today is to fill you in on what's in our initial draft of the West Side Plan. We just presented it to the public, and it's been out for review. We just closed a online survey on it. And so this is an opportunity for us to get your initial thoughts on the draft plan before we really dive into all the public comments and start making revisions on the plan itself. So I'm going to also cover a little bit of the public input we've received to date, show you the future land use map, and cover the bulk of the plan is in what we call the vision statements, vision themes, and policy initiatives in public investments. You are probably pretty familiar with what our area development plans are. They're more or less a general plan for specific areas of our city, and we have nine planning districts. A lot of our plans had been pretty out of date. So late 1980s was when a lot of them were created, and the West Side is one of those that needed updating. But our area development plan processes are an opportunity for us to look at what kind of regulatory or code changes need to happen. It's also an opportunity to identify and build partnerships, community partnerships, and to look at where infrastructure improvements are needed, and also think about what could be catalyst projects for these areas. So this is our West Side study boundary. It's 21 square miles. It's basically all of the neighborhoods west of the Crosstown Expressway, all the way from I-37 to the Oso Creek. We started this project in late 2019, and we've been working with our advisory committee, and your Commissioner Schrader is a liaison to the Planning Commission and serves on that committee. So we've been reviewing this draft plan and gotten here with the support of our advisory committee and also the public input, first public meeting we had, an online survey. And to go back to the initial public input that we received on this study, on this area, I do want to point out a few characteristics of the community itself. So we have roughly 54,000 people living in this study area. We have a median home value of $71,000. We have 36%, our highest percentage here, have no high school diploma. 35% have are high school graduates, and 17% have some college, 10% have a college degree. We also have that 86% of this study area is of Hispanic origin, and that compares to roughly, I think it's somewhere 64% or so for citywide. This here is a summary of what our advisory committee has said to date. So in our meetings here, what has come up about this area is some opportunities to revitalize areas along the Crosstown area. Salinas Park has come up multiple times in the advisory committee, but also in the public about needing improvements. That we need enhanced code enforcement in these areas. A lot of comments about abandoned properties and how those can hurt neighborhoods and businesses. Also needs for incentives or assistance in reinvesting in these neighborhoods. Some of the strengths here are that it's a good location for affordable housing. People have said too that they would like to be able to stay in these neighborhoods. So opportunities for different types of housing at different income levels in this area. People have commented too about the culture in this area being friendly, family-oriented, and that it's also unique in that it's an industry hub for our city. Concerns have been about health and welfare of the community, infrastructure maintenance. We do hear that citywide, but infrastructure maintenance is a concern here, especially drainage, and struggling businesses. Threats would be crime and drugs. People moving out of the area is a threat to its success. And we have a lot of comments, too, about addressing homelessness, which is a citywide issue, or being tackled citywide, I should say, but we do have a lot of concerns, particularly in this area. So as far as the vision goes, the comments we received early on were about, again, this is a culturally rich area of our city. Safe neighborhoods would be a vision for the future of it. Thriving, healthy, living, and working community. I'm going to cover this pretty quickly, but from our community open house, we heard that there was a strong connection to schools. Okay, that was something that was one of the favorite parts, and I've heard that a lot of ties to Moody High School, West Oso, and Miller High School. That community can be developed around those schools. That townhomes were one of the most needed housing types in this area. Similarly, what was missing the most in that west side area, the people at the open house who attended said that they needed more housing choices. In the online survey, we also heard from 326 people, by the way. We heard that their priorities were amenities and services, improving existing parks. This one here said that more single-family homes were needed. I mentioned that. More types of housing at all income levels. Family-friendly amenities were a priority. Better transportation, including all modes of transportation. And water quality as being an environmental issue. On our future land use map, which is something you all are very familiar with, you see that in every rezoning. You know the importance of that. It helps us make decisions on rezonings, but it also helps us in the planning department look at where growth is happening and how to organize growth so that neighborhoods and businesses, for example, which is a concern in the west side, how neighborhoods and businesses interface, right? So we look at how our neighborhoods are organized in the future land use planning. This is the proposed future land use map, and I think I said that was on page 17 of the draft plan. So you can take a closer look at that. But one of the reason I mentioned the interface of businesses and neighborhoods is because that is a theme that came up often. The West Side does have a lot of industry, light industry mostly. And so it's a unique aspect of the West Side, the mix of neighborhoods and jobs. So I said the vision themes and the policy initiatives are really the bulk of the plan here. The way the plan is organized is we have a vision theme for the future, and so we do provide a graphic illustration to help imagine, what this means. Under each vision theme, we have 7 policy initiatives that help reach the vision. And each policy initiative also has actions. So we had 3 vision themes. The first one was on revitalization. The second one was on culture. And the third one was on health and safety. So the first one said that in the future, West Side neighborhoods are invigorated by economic development, enhanced neighborhoods, and access to job training and educational opportunities. As for culture, that in the future, the city celebrates the heritage of West Side neighborhoods by building on its deep-rooted culture. This here is an image, by the way, of the Antonio E. Garcia Arts and Education Center on Agnes that has a pretty strong cultural presence in the area. The third vision theme is on health and safety. So in the future, West Side neighborhoods are safe, family-oriented communities that support a high quality of life. Okay, so there are 7 policy initiatives, and the first one was on safety. Here we're saying that we should enhance the overall sense of safety through improved programming and environmental design. And some of the highlights of those action items that would fall under that are improving lighting for safety. That's something that is the most prominent comment, I think, actually, that we receive is a need for better lighting. And that would be at key areas. Implementing crime prevention through environmental design. That's something that the police department is mostly in charge of, doing security surveys, but really looking at ways as a community and through design as well, we can make areas safer or reduce opportunities for crime. Supporting community cleanup, supporting neighborhood empowerment, and improved code enforcement. Those are the highlights of the action items. The second one is on transportation and drainage. So improving transportation and drainage infrastructure to create a safe environment for all road users and to mitigate the impacts on the community from flooding. The action items in this initiative include improving flooding and drainage through really alternative methods. So this here is about rain gardens and bioswales, but also upgrading deficient pipes as we do our street improvement projects. Establishing gateways to special areas, constructing the Lavoya Creek Drainage Improvement Project, and including recreational amenities with that. The third policy initiative was on healthy living, so improving or expanding facilities and programming to support a healthy lifestyle. And these action items include increasing access to healthy foods, improving existing parks according to the Parks and Rec Master Plan, and that was, I think it has its second reading for approval at the City Council next month. Improving connectivity by extending trails, bike lanes, and sidewalks. And in the same vein there, improving pedestrian connectivity. The reason why pedestrian activity is included there is under healthy living is because it does give people the opportunity to fit in some exercise while they're getting to and from places. So being able to do that safely. and support and increase participation in healthy living programs, which right now is mostly through our health department. The fourth policy initiative is on housing and neighborhoods. So support a variety of housing options and affordability levels to encourage home ownership and sustain the existing housing stock. And here we talk about action items relating to supporting infill residential development. And this year, the City Council has funded an infill program. Encouraging development of the various housing types to meet housing needs at multiple income levels. And improving drainage in neighborhoods, such as within the Molina area. And a really big project is that Lavoya Creek drainage project, and that's could significantly help the Molina area and reduce its flood zones. The fifth initiative is on culture and history, so preserving, promoting, and celebrating the local history and culture of the West Side. The action items here include things like encouraging cultural events to happen in this area and coordinating with the Antonio E. Garcia Arts and Education Center is run through Texas A&M. So continuing to coordinate with that department or that organization, agency of A&M, and helping to expand its capacity. Also building on what we would consider a unique historic urban design that's found in some of these neighborhoods. So we do have historic neighborhoods in this area, like Oak Park and Saxett Heights, for example. The sixth policy initiative is on community services and programs. So expanding our public and private community services and programs is that initiative. Education about what programs are available is part of that action item. For example, Neighborhood Services Department was recently formed this year, or late last year, I can't remember. And they started having events to help give out information on all of the various city services. Seeking help from our partners to help promote and increase participation in these kinds of service events. And also increasing access to youth programs through schools and other nonprofits. That was pretty popular in our survey as as being very important. The last initiative is on economic development. So foster an environment for economic development that attracts new businesses, increases employment, and revitalizes or enhances existing commercial and industrial areas. We did hear a lot in our surveys from people that, they would like more neighborhoods that fit all income levels and more housing options. And that also, I think, goes hand in hand with retail. They do also, people want more retail options in this area. So some of those action items include supporting small businesses, expanding water and wastewater infrastructure. There was an idea to brand, well, it really is already branded, but Agnes Street, kind of rebranding that as industrial corridor. And coordinating and supporting the redevelopment of the Memorial Hospital site. I'm sorry if I didn't change that slide, I missed that. So our plans also include, so that we help coordinate in the city and tie future CIP capital improvement programs to public input that we've received. We have public investment initiatives included in our plans. So we start developing these maps by mapping our capital improvement program and bond projects. And so most of those are captured here. Oh, and our infrastructure management plan, that's the street street rehab program, basically. So most of those projects are in the short-term category here. And these are on pages 48 through 55 of the document as well for bigger pictures. So we have midterm also and long-term. That basically covers the content of our draft plan. Our next steps are we've begun analyzing our public input that we received on in our survey. We had 180 people complete that survey, less than the first one, but that's typical because there's a lot more reading to do. It's a longer survey. So our next steps will be revising this draft plan based on the public input that we've received, and then presenting it, having a public comment period again on that, and then we'll come to you for public hearings, and then the council for adoption. We'll also have another advisory committee to review and discuss the input that we've received and needed changes to it. But at this time, I wanted to see if you had any specific questions. I know this was an overview, so I'm happy to go into any more detail if you have a pointed question.
Anyone have questions for staff? All right, thank you very much. Great presentation.
Feel free to go to our website, creatingcc.com, and you'll find all of the materials, including the past engagement, and you can my contact information is there also. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the consent public hearing agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Andrew Demas with Development Services. Reading in tonight's consent agenda, starting with item A, plats. Item number 3, Edgewater Terrace, Block 2, Lot 7R, replat of 1.205 acres. Item number 4, Gardendale Unit 2, Block 7, Lots 35A and 35B, a replat of .45 acres. Item number 5, Azali Estates Unit 3, a final of 13.84 acres. Item number 6, original town site of Cal Island, Block 23, lots 8R, 9R, and 10R, and 11R, a replat of 1.29 acres. And item number 7, Corpus Christi, Yorktown, a final of 2.08 acres. Staff has reviewed the following plats and, along with the Technical Review Committee, deemed them complete as far as meeting both the Unified Development Code and State Local Government Code, and staff recommends approval. Moving on to item 8, which is a sidewalk waiver of a plat that was previously heard at the last meeting. Staff is recommending approval for Roblex Industrial Subdivision, Block 4B, Lots 1 and 2, a replat of 19.86 acres. And then 2 sister items, which is items 9 and 10. Shannon Estates West, Unit 13, a final plat of 10.006 acres, which has an accompanying street waiver. Staff also recommends approval. And that concludes tonight's consent agenda. If there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to address them.
Commissioner Schrader.
I have 2 clarification items. On item 3, it says ON from RS10, but that's not a change in, this is, they're not changing that, correct?
Correct. It might have just been a misprint. Item number 3, Edgewater Terrace. Let's go to our plats.
It was on
This
the,
was
it
a
on the
previous change of
introductory-
zoning, and it
Yeah.
had changed to ON district, correct.
Okay.
So it was inverted. It was originally RS10 and had changed to ON.
Okay. Second clarification, item 6, this was one of these conditional approvals, and the condition is that they need to identify that water line, correct?
Correct.
If it's live or whatever, but in other words, before they can proceed, they have to.
Correct. So it would be
Determine
tied
what
to their
that is.
public improvements.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Moving on to item number, I guess, probably 11 and 12. You're doing those together?
Yes, sir. Thank you. All righty, so items number 11 and 12 are both related to Holiday Harbor subdivision, a replat of 3.04 acres. And specifically for item 12, we have a dual, both sidewalk and right-of-way waiver request. So the PowerPoint on the screen, as you'll see, the subject property is located at the intersection of Yorktown Boulevard and Laguna Shores Road. The question has come up about the sidewalk and street construction along both street frontages. The property is currently an RV park that is in the process of redeveloping. It is going to remain an RV park. And why this is coming up now is as the original park consisted of many multiple lots during the replatting process of combining all those lots together. That is a time in which public improvements and any dedications come up for question. So hence, that's why we're here tonight. So again, here's a larger aerial view to give you a perspective of we are, again, right at the corner of Yorktown and Laguna Shores. This is to the east of the intersection of Waldron and Yorktown Boulevard. Here is a view of the subject property and its condition as an RV park. Here's a slide from Yorktown Boulevard. And as you can see, the properties across the street in either direction are currently vacant. And of course, you have some waterfront property as well. Now, questions have come up, of course, as we have on-site, or I should say roadside drainage ditches on both Laguna Shores and Yorktown. Laguna Shores was a recently completed bond project. And this is just to highlight the new drainage crossing at the intersection. One of the questions is, of course, about dedication, as I'm sure you saw in the report. It's not only just construction of sidewalks and potentially the street, but also the 10-foot dedication along Laguna Shores. And this is a copy of the submitted plat. Now, as you know, with every waiver request that comes before this body, we like to get both sides of the story, the factors that weighing for granting a request and factors weighing in favor of construction or against granting such a request. So in the column for factors in favor supporting the applicant's request, there is a significant drainage ditch that was recently constructed a very short time ago there at the intersection of Yorktown and Laguna Shores. There are no existing sidewalks in which this network would connect to. Of course, I always believe, a network starts at a corner. We have to start somewhere. However, I do understand there being roadside ditches, that there are some other mitigating factors. Additionally, the roadway for that length does not have curb and gutter on either Laguna Shores or Yorktown. Now, one of the factors weighing against the waiver is, of course, Yorktown and Laguna Shores are both on multiple plans, being the mobility plan, our urban transportation plan, the ADA master plan. So this has been slated on several different plans for improvement. Moving on to further factors, we'll start with in support of the request. To the north, the right-of-way is consistent from Laguna Shores to Waldron Road, meaning it is consistently a roadside ditch. Dedication would pass through an existing structure on site, and many others to the west, and that's as you're going back towards Waldron Road. A factor against granting a request, which is the 10-foot right-of-way dedication, is necessary in order to meet the 80-foot right-of-way requirement for a parkway. In this case, Laguna Shores is designated as a parkway in the urban transportation plan, and that's where that 80-foot minimum right-of-way width originates. Now, of course, this is just the same information we post on most of these waiver requests to refresh the Planning Commission on where does the request start from, how does it process through the UDC, what is the applicable language, and then, of course, rounding out with the staff recommendation. So we are recommending disapproval of the Laguna Shores Road right-of-way dedication, since the 10-foot dedication is necessary to meet that minimum requirement. And of course, Planning Commission has the choice of either approving, denying, granting conditions. And with that, if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to address them.
And we're recommending approval of the construction waiver.
Yes, ma'am, correct. We're recommending approval of waiving construction of the sidewalk. It is the dedication where we're still recommending that the dedication still occur. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for staff on item 10 or 11 or 12?
Sorry, could you clarify your recommendation, please?
Yes. So imagine there's three parts to this process. There is the construction of the sidewalk, the dedication of the right-of-way, and that's that construction along Laguna Shores and Yorktown. We're in agreement of waiving the construction along Yorktown and Laguna Shores. However, we are in disagreement and recommending disapproval of granting a waiver on the dedication, meaning we would still like to see the 10 feet dedicated along the Laguna Shores.
And in that 10 feet dedication, that's going to affect an existing structure that's in that 10 foot, is that correct?
That is the existing drainage structure, correct. That was recently completed.
So,
We can go back to if you can imagine, the 10 feet is draining both directions to this new crossing.
so is what's affected in this 10 feet the new drainage structure, or was there a building or what?
I think the applicant said there was a building, but I didn't see one, so maybe the applicant can speak to that.
We'll bring the applicant up just a sec. Okay. And whoever, the city councilman's names are on my list, so I know somebody asked, whoever just clicked their button was Councilman Pusley, so I'm not sure who's wanted to talk, so just kind of let me know and raise your head, but.
You may know this. What is the whole intention of rerouting from what it is now?
Sure. So, of course, going back to we'll go back to the wider aerial. It's a little bit hard to see because of the block, but in this area of the property, there was a former mini storage kind of business that was operating. Now, the predominant use, 95% of the site has been RV parks. And as this park is developing, and much to a great project to see this park redevelop, this is the things that we get excited about, of seeing Flower Bluff continue to improve. And along with that demolition, whenever you're going to install new hookups, that would be utilities crossing lot lines, which is a no-no when it comes to the UDC. Unless you're in an easement, we do not allow any type of utility to cross those lot lines. So by erasing, very similar to across the street, erasing all these dividing lot lines and creating one solid lot will allow the integration of all those utility lines along with the redesign of the RV park and the demolition of the former mini storage business.
And on that 10-foot easement that you guys want, is there already, do y'all have plans
And that's the literally the $1 million question. So Yorktown Boulevard was on Laguna Shores was on a recent bond, and there were some improvements made to the roadway. A future phase, why we would need dedication, is not just to suffice the urban transportation plan, but that's where it grants the room in order to add underground drainage and then a cycle track and, of course, a sidewalk.
Any other questions?
But there is no dedication to the adjacent properties, right? Right, those adjacent properties, do they have that 10-foot dedication?
As those properties come in for replat is when we assume that dedication. So properties, as you go further along Laguna Shores, like on Rivera Drive, they have come in for replats, and we have obtained the 10-foot dedication.
So what's right next to the property boundary, like on the corner where your red line ends?
Yes.
Is there a structure right there?
Correct.
Is that a house, or, is that a building, or is that a land?
That is a single-family home, and the on-street roadside drainage continues along Yorktown to the west.
And what about
I
right
think
next?
the waiver is for the right-of-way is only for Laguna Shores.
Correct.
Because Yorktown
Has the appropriate width.
They have the appropriate right-of-way width.
So the focus
So the
on the
right-of-way is
right-of-way
Laguna
waiver
Shores.
is this section right here on Laguna Shores.
But the properties also right across, they don't have that 10-foot right-of-way because they haven't gone through the plat yet, or replats.
Correct. So when the property across the street comes into replat, and there have been some folks asking about it, when they combine those lots together, they will receive a similar request for dedication to meet the 80-foot width.
Sure, my question, or the reason for my question is the consistency of it, in terms of what's the chance, is there construction on those lots already been there, or
No.
there are lots?
Across the street, no construction has begun. There's only been a discussion of future development.
What happens, let's say the city does some bond program or capital program and they want to expand Laguna Shores, and you've got properties that haven't had a dedication, but, you know, as part of the bond program, you don't have a trigger because it's not coming for replat or something like that. Would the city on those properties condemn it via eminent domain, what happens on that?
There's
If, you know, you got to finish out the street.
Yeah, it could either be a friendly acquisition or through, the eminent domain.
And by a friendly acquisition, does the city pay that landowner for,
Typically, yes, and it
Okay.
would be a negotiation.
same thing if it was eminent domain, which is
Right.
unfriendly, they'd pay
And-
for it. In this
Correct.
case.
In my consultation also with Engineering Services, who administers the bond program, they also rely on us obtaining that right-of-way through the replatting process. And so that is why we are recommending disapproval of the waiver to right-of-way.
And if this comes up through a replat, is there any consideration given to the landowner for,
No, it's considered an exaction through platting.
yeah, so basically it's, you want a permit, give us the land for free, right?
Right, which is what we do on the majority of our plant,
Right,
on the
correct.
majority of our plats.
Okay.
Is there any action that has to be taken by the property owner if disapproval of the right-of-way is accepted by the commission? Do they have to, is there anything, or are you just taking that land? Is there any
Correct.
building or any construction or any,
At this point, it'd be purely dedication.
so no cost associated with?
They,
taking-
well, if I'm understanding correctly, they wouldn't incur a cost. It would just be dedicating that land as part of the plat. And then if at a future date of construction of city utilities or infrastructure is when we would come in and actually construct, but it wouldn't be on their responsibility for that construction.
And so if there was a building or a structure inside that dedication, the city wouldn't immediately say, hey, you got to tear that thing down. It would only get triggered whenever a project happened, I guess.
Much like we've seen with TxDOT acquisitions for rights of way, that's when we come in and we'll look at, parking requirements or, how much of the building is actually impacted. In some cases, I believe there was a few businesses that had to shave off a portion of the building but didn't have to demo. So there are tools in the toolbox.
Okay. Any other questions for staff?
And just to confirm, there are no buildings in this 10-foot right-of-way at the current moment? Nothing they would have to tear down or adjust?
I think the applicant needs to speak to that.
I believe there's a sign at worst, but structurally.
Okay.
And typically, if it's a sign, they would just be asked to relocate that sign.
All right, if there's no other questions for staff.
I do have one more,
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
You mentioned that there was a bond for Laguna Shores down the road. Did construction take place, or was just the bond just approved for that work?
It was various sections of Laguna Shores have been improved in a sequential pattern. Most of the focus is restoring the right-of-way itself to be in a.
So the right-of-way will be 80 feet in those new areas?
Correct, but the focus thus far has been on the roadway, the pavement section itself, and then in some cases sidewalks have been improved. But of course, it's, you have to save the street first, and then in future projects, you would have the amenities to get past roadside drainage, move to underground drainage, add wider sidewalks. But it's a process.
Sure.
Something. I mean, I'm looking at this, I'm glad you got this picture up. This location of the new drainage crossing, so that's something that was just recently developed, because on the other side there, it looks like that there's not even dredging on that ditch, or how does the water, I mean, how is the water drained?
Okay,
Is it-
this aerial is not an accurate
It's not
reflection.
the most up-to-date. It's,
That's
Oh.
the
this
most
is
up-to-date.
the most up-to-date. So you have roadside drainage in this pattern that culminates at the crossing, and you have the movement of water backwards and forwards, and then to the appropriate body of water in which,
So the drainage right now does have a good flow when it rains, like, when it hasn't rained in a while, but, you know.
good is subjective, but it does have the ability to channel stormwater.
Okay, well, because he's gonna replat it to develop, I'm assuming more,
Some additional units.
yes, some
correct.
additional units, which means there'll be more activity.
And that poses a
more-
very good question. So along with every replat, a stormwater quality management plan is required, and that is to where we, based on hydrologic calculations, determine impact to the system. Now, typically, you're not allowed to make an impact to the system that the system cannot handle. And that's where the question about, is there going to be underground drainage on the site? Is it going to be sheet flowing? Do they have to detain so much water and discharge at a certain flow? That's all handled on the tail end of the platting process with public improvements.
Okay, because I know right now we don't have that issue because it hasn't rained in a while, but when it does
Sure.
rain down here, we really get some heavy, hard rains. So-
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
All right, no other questions for staff. We'll go ahead and open up the public hearing.
Thank you.
And if the applicant's here, feel free to speak first, and if you would, please state your name and address for the record. Generally, it's one at a time, yeah.
Thank you. I'm Murray Bass with Bass and Welch Engineering, 3054 South Alameda. We're the engineers for the project for Mr. Lundquist. I think it will have an adverse effect. The dedication of this additional 10 feet will have an adverse effect on the project. There's not a lot of room there to begin with, and when we move back 10 feet, plus moving back, that moves all the other setbacks that are required as a condition of building, then we're short of space. The city didn't do any right-of-way acquisition with the Laguna Shore Road improvements, apparently. And so, but it will adversely affect this. Plus the fact it will be some expense. I'm pretty sure they're going to make us tear down the fence that's along the right-of-way line right now and have to replace that. So that's 665 feet. That's a significant expense.
Any questions for the applicant? Okay.
Thank you.
Cooper Lundquist, one of the owners of the property. That was sort of some clarification for me as well. So the Laguna Shores, we were under the impression, I believe, that it's Yorktown and Laguna Shores, because in the paperwork we got from the city, it shows the line going across the Yorktown side of the park, which goes across a existing building. But what you're telling me, it's just Laguna Shores. Is that what I'm understanding?
The dedication is along Laguna Shores, but fortunately Yorktown is appropriately wide enough.
Okay. So if it's just Laguna Shores, and the way I understand it is taking 10 feet of that, and to Murray's point, now sets back the entire park, that takes out roughly, 20 to 30 RV pads that will need to be moved and then theoretically need to be not part of the park, which would then take our revenue by 20 or 30 pads, which obviously impacts the whole entire project and the park itself. Therefore, it's a moot point to even discuss adding more if we're going to remove 30 or so. I haven't done that math, but moving it back 10 feet certainly impacts the park and the project itself. in my opinion, if Laguna Shore needed to have sidewalks or future sidewalks, the city did just spend a bunch of money. Improving Laguna Shores was great, looks phenomenal. Raised 18 inches, I believe, for the stormwater to help the drainage. We're going to have our stormwater studies and make sure our drainage is correct. So overall, I think our project is improvement for the area as well. As he mentioned, we're consistent with what's going on in Flower Bluff. Concrete roads, pool. The demolition, we did add more pads. That was dilapidated metal buildings that have been there forever. I don't know how long, but they were barely in use, didn't close. So it wasn't, it was a storage, but it was not good looking, didn't really generate, they weren't all rented. So we knocked those down to then improve the park. But I guess the point is, if the, I'm all for consistency, so, but taking 10 feet moves back the park 10 feet, in turn removes a lot of pads, which in turn removes the revenue, which in turns make the project not work. You know, what else? So,
You got a
Questions?
question for the applicant?
How many, with what you tore down, how many pads are you looking at adding in that area?
we're adding approximately 20. I think we have 39 now.
Kind of doesn't make sense to add 20, take 20.
Right, zero, yeah, exactly, doesn't make sense at all. Yeah. Yeah, and it's, I'll say it again, it's a great project for the Bluff. About 1.5 million, concrete roads, pool, consistent with kind of how KOA is down the road. We actually have the project, the property across the road under contract, the one that Yorktown runs into, and we plan on improving that as well. We have the park up the road at Yorktown and Waldron that we have improved the last couple of months since we bought it, and 2.5 acres on the corner of Waldron and Yorktown that we want to improve as well. So our group's heavy in the Bluff, and we want to improve it and keep improving it. So we believe we're good for the city.
The tenants that stay in this RV park, are they long-term, short-term?
It's a short-term park. The one up the road is more of a long-term park for us. But this one is more, we had some long-term tenants in there, and we took about 15 that were there and actually moved them to the park on the corner of Waldron and Yorktown. And so this is going to be more of a short-term park, we envision it, but with some long-term people possibly as well.
Andrew, if he were to rebuild the storage units, you know, because that would make a lot of sense for a lot of, may need room. Hard to replat it, even if.
Now that it's been demolished, yes.
And part of our 2 acres on the corner of Waldron and Yorktown, we're thinking about storage units there, if that helps you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody wishing to make public comment on items 11 or 12?
If you wouldn't mind, please, sir.
Yes, sir.
One thought. This is basically, inside the park, a remodeling project. We were going to utilize all of the existing facilities for the hookups for the RVs. So if we displace everything by 10 feet, that's going to throw all that out, and we may have to run entirely new utility connections for the at least half of it anyway, or better. So that will be a big thing there, because we had planned to use all of the existing utility connections. Thank you.
I have a question for staff.
Yes.
Y'all mentioned with the new recent bond that was approved to help the infrastructure of Laguna Shore.
Yes, sir.
Just a question, would it be more feasible to ask for that dedication throughout the process from the owners to create more of a consistency? So that, for example, in this case, this applicant has to give a dedication or you guys requesting to give the dedication, but the next door person may never ever
It would be an
reply to-
acquisition at cost, so it's.
Sure, but I mean,
It's not it's kind of between your rock and a hard place. You don't want to penalize someone for obviously trying to improve an area, but at the same time, in the future, if an acquisition has to take place, that 10 feet's going to have to be taken anyway, and then you're having to shift units after the fact. So there's not really a,
Yeah, but this happened on quarter of Staples toward 286 when TxDOT expanded it, right? They asked for the dedication for everyone. to
well,
create more
I
of a
think
consistent-
TxDOT will just take it. It's they swing a little bit bigger stick than us. TxDOT will just, cut your parking lot in half. I've seen it happen, but it's.
I'm just trying to figure out what a better way would be for creating a better consistency. Obviously, they're wanting to improve their development, their project, but the next door neighbor may not come and want to request any replat anytime soon, right? So in this
Exactly,
case,
and it would wait until a future
Exactly.
acquisition happened, which.
if any.
If any. So I completely agree with you, and there's not, you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. You don't want to penalize someone who's, again, trying to improve an area, but at the same time, you don't want to set them up for failure 5-10 years down the road when that improvement wants to come in, you're having to acquire the property anyway. So I don't envy the decision, but that is why we as staff are supporting the dedication, knowing that there would be a potential improvement at some point in the future.
Is that part of a discussion or part of a future bond or plan? That-
This is the time that bond projects are being decided, so.
No, just in speaking with our engineering services staff, they again recommended the dedication. There's not a project right now, but the point is there may be one in the future.
Andrew, if the commission voted to go against staff's recommendation and not grant the dedication now.
Yes, sir.
And let's say, whatever it is, at some point in the future, 3 or 5 years down the road, this gentleman's already constructed improvements, not requiring a dedication, they add, I don't know, whatever it is, 20 spaces they're gonna add, and then whenever that dedication happens, I'm assuming there's probably some existing spaces that are gonna be pretty close to this easement, because they're talking about the utility problem. What would happen at that point? So, city makes them an offer, whether through eminent domain or peaceful to acquire that 10-foot. What's the city's reaction once that's required as it relates to his project? Do they say, hey, you guys are out of business because it's too close to the easement? Is it a grandfathered situation? I mean, what happens for him at that point?
I would.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to speculate
Right,
on how
that's
they would negotiate.
exactly what I was going to say.
I think it's just a case-by-case consideration when they do these projects.
It's case by case on them acquiring the dedication, or it's case by case on what they would do with improvements that are proximate to the dedication?
And it's not so much to give, we're not trying to give an evasive answer. It's that, on some projects, it's simple. If it was a parking lot and there's no encroaching structures, it's easy to fit the facility. But in some cases, you may have variables that aren't as easily seen from an aerial image. It's much like when you do remodeling. You don't know what's behind the wall till you demo the wall. And there could be some other underlying issues that'll come about at that negotiation point of, do we as a city have to alter our plans to fit, or is it now going to be maybe a not-so-friendly negotiation to acquire the land? And that's why we hesitate on speculating which way negotiations would go.
But I guess, like, in theory, I mean, you could have a scenario where maybe the city says, hey, this is adjacent to a roadway from a public safety standpoint. We can't have an RV park,
Sure.
right next to the roadway or whatever, because in theory, an accident happens, and I mean,
Right.
I guess anything's potentially possible, so, okay.
Is it a 25-foot yard requirement from that street?
It would be 20
20?
for the RMH district.
Commissioner Mandel?
What does Laguna Shores look like in terms of the Flower Bluff ADP? You said the future could be possible bike and jogging trail along Laguna Shores.
Yes, it does list a one-way cycle track along with an improved, widened sidewalk. Parkways are known for a slower speed, a kind of a view corridor for driving, and for, of course, active and passive recreation.
Okay.
Commissioner Schroeder?
So you said, Mr. Demus, this is a parkway section that's
Yes, sir.
contemplated for this. This is virtually at the end of the road, literally and figuratively. So do any of these parkway sections or precedents have, is there a precedent for narrowing these or tapering these because it's essentially at this point picking up substantially less traffic?
And that's a fair point. It's kind of like a trailhead. Trailhead can be your best feature. It's like an entrance gate, or it could also be where the trail ends. I would say because of the traffic drastically changing at the intersection of Yorktown, it's where you would want to have the widest berth for wide left-hand turns to go up to the KOA facility. There is going to be traffic moving on Yorktown with larger vehicles. So I would say, and I'm not a traffic engineer, but I would say that's actually where you would want a wide turn and widest pavement ability to negotiate an increased amount of traffic and the size of the vehicle.
So with this, it's 80-foot right of way? Is that correct?
80 feet, yes, sir.
What is in the plan, how many lanes?
That is, for the most part, it's typically 3 lanes with a center turn lane. In some cases, you'll see parkways. For instance, I live on Bronner Parkway, so it's only a 2-lane split by a drainage easement. So parkways are most known for their width, first and foremost, and then in some cases we'll have shoulder parking, so it's technically 4 lanes, but it's really 2 lanes of travel and on-street parking. So there's not really there's multiple ways parkways can be designed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I guess at this point, I'll look for a motion on items 11 and 12.
Make a motion that we approve the sidewalk waiver and go against city recommendation on disapproval of the right-of-way.
We got a motion. Do we have a second? I'll second that.
The motion was to go against the city recommendation? Or
Yes.
in favor of recommend? Just
The motion is to approve the sidewalk waiver and to approve the right-of-way waiver as well.
Correct.
Correct.
I second that also. Or
All right. Well,
I think Mr. Dibble
I
seconded the
seconded it
motion.
already. So we have a motion and a second. Can we do kind of a actual
Roll call.
For approval?
Okay. Chairman Dibble,
Approve.
Vice Chairman Schrader,
Opposed?
Commissioner Zarguni,
yes.
Commissioner Miller is absent, Commissioner York is absent, Commissioner Gonzalez,
Aye.
Commissioner Mandel,
Oppose.
Commissioner Salazar Garza,
Oppose.
and Commissioner Munoz.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right.
Okay. Just understand that Planning Commission is kind of a close vote here, but we're not a approval body. We are a recommending body. So ultimately, this item will go to the City Council for.
No, Mr. Dibble, this is a final decision
Okay.
by Planning
Very good.
Commission.
Excuse
You're thinking
me.
of zoning.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, you're in the clear. Moving on to Director's Report.
Good evening, everyone. Really, the only thing I have to announce this evening is that this is our chairman's last Planning Commission meeting and Airport Zoning Commission meeting. And we would like to thank you, Daniel, for all of your continued service to the city of Corpus Christi and for chairing our Planning Commission.
Well,
And there may be some remarks that perhaps some of the commissioners might want to make, and of course, feel free to make a remark.
I'll tell you, I appreciate that. It actually popped up on my Facebook feed yesterday, getting sworn in City Council meeting when Nelda was our mayor, I guess, and kind of surprising how 6 years passes, and I think I have thoroughly enjoyed my time on this commission. I know sometimes there's issues, I think where we've had disagreements on some things we've agreed on, but I do think what's come out of that process is what I think the intention of the commission is to kind of bring different points of view and really look at issues, from a variety of angles and hopefully complement what the staff's doing to bring issues out and talk through it. So it's been great, and I thank you for that.
I just want to say I've known Mr. Dibble for years, but it's also a great experience and a journey to work along your side. Like you said, working on different issues, discussion topics. I appreciate you and your level of professionalism you bring in. Good luck. See you soon in your future interview.
Thank you.
Thank you for all you do.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Wish I had more time, kind of than you guys. So it was nice sitting with you.
With that being said, I guess we can adjourn the planning commission meeting.
Yes, sir.
And then we can convene the airport zoning commission meeting. And we need a roll call for that?
Chairman Dibble,
Here?
Vice Chairman Schrader,
Here.
Commissioner Zarguni,
Here.
Commissioner Miller is absent, Commissioner York is also absent, Commissioner Gonzalez,
Here.
Commissioner Mandel,
Here.
Commissioner Salazar Garza, and Commissioner Munoz.
Here.
Quorum established.
Okay, moving on, we need to, open the public comment for the airport zoning commission meeting. Anyone wishing to speak can come up now for general public comment. There being none, we will close the public comment hearing and go to approval of absences.
I make a motion that we approve the approval of the absence of Commissioner Mandel.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Moving on to approval of minutes from the October 27th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Make a motion that we approve the minute as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I guess we've got a briefing on the military compatibility zone.
Yes, sir.
Just maybe in the interest of time on the, do we need to do a full briefing on this item, even though it was kind of the same briefing, or is there a way to do
I wanted to keep it a very loose Q&A.
Wonderful.
As I was saying, as Sister Judith used to tell me my sophomore year, I hope everybody did their required reading and did their homework. But nevertheless, it is very similar to the ordinance you have previously seen. I wanted to bring up to the commission that we did what we like to call internally the road show, in which we gave a public presentation to every single city council district, giving plenty of opportunity for folks to attend, submit their questions, have conversations. We kept it in kind of what I like to call the science fair format, where we had easels and folks walked around and just asked. Of course, Flower Bluff being the most impacted of all of the various council districts, which is Council District 4, we had a great turnout. About 30 folks showed up, asked a ton of questions, most of all left with peace of mind. And that's one thing that I wanted to emphasize, because many concerns were about if I wanted to add a bedroom to my house, or what if I'm damaged by a hurricane or a fire or flood, does that mean I now have to find a new place to live? Absolutely not. There are built-in protections, not only because of the MCAOD, but existing in the UDC already of protections for nonconformities. We took it a step further and made sure that we added clarifying language that said, no matter what, you can always build a single-family home. Of course, you need to be in a residential district to begin with, like any other zoning district, but that use, that your home is your castle, is always protected to build a home. A few other things that we did add, and it was based on the conversation with District 3, was adding an idea. As you know, that District 3 is where Cabin is Field is located. And of course, the big question has been about apartment complexes and schools, at Carroll High School, not to bring up a sore subject. But the idea behind that is just because there is an overlay now does not mean that business just stops, that this is land that you cannot develop. So questions came about is we still have to plan for a very busy student population that is going to need personal services, and that's a very fancy way of saying retail and restaurants and all sorts of things. So that being said, in researching what some other cities have done in how do you accommodate retail uses or restaurant uses in an overlay, one such thing item came up, and that is more restaurants are moving to a prototype because of the world post-COVID of non-dine-in services, meaning it is entirely to-go or entirely curbside. So we added a provision right on your screen, number 8, that says if you have drive-through only restaurants or curbside restaurants, as long as you're not having on-site consumption, those are still allowed. Those are still going to be moving. And it actually makes perfect sense being next to a high school. You're going to have a student population leave for the lunch period, go and grab, Wendy's, Chick-Fil-A, McDonald's, and then come right back. And it's going to stay in that to-go format. Of course, Saratoga being as busy as it is and what I like to call the 3-mile-long school zone, you're still going to have plenty of traffic moving through there that is going to need these services. So we found that as a good compromise to still allow business to operate. We're not in the business of stopping development. It is to promote and find a balance of what does work within the overlay recommendations. So that's one other add-on that we made. Outside of that, most of the language remained the same about, of course, lighting, your noise. Again, noise only applies to new residential buildings, and there are very few residential properties only in the Flower Bluff area that are actually touched by that noise subzone itself. So that's another good news item. Imaginary surfaces is not too much of a concern till you're getting into a very high elevation of 200, 400 feet in the air. Unless you're building a 20-story building, you're not going to be impacted by any type of slopes or design for height. And then lastly, we added some information. This is not a brand new addition, but supplemental information which talks about putting a note on the plat for properties that are within the overlay zone. That is to make sure that it is recorded, just as we review plats every planning commission, that note will remain on there. Not that every homeowner pulls their plat, but those that are in the market that choose to do some due diligence on their purchase will see that note. So it's another form of disclosure to make sure that folks are informed that they're within an overlay zone. But outside of that, there has been no other updates. I'm happy to say that we presented to the Builders Association, we presented to the Chamber of Commerce, we presented to the Chamber's Infrastructure Committee. Of course, we had continued conversations with the Navy, and we've had a lot of smiles and shaking of hands. So I think we have a good compromise. We've been able to alleviate the main concerns of the residents that are impacted, that fear that they may lose their ability to have a single-family home, and that being alleviated, we have a good path forward, and I'm happy to kind of answer any questions you have. Of course, everybody be ready for August the 9th. That is when our joint meeting is going to happen with City Council in this very room. So that'll be the next step. The meeting will start at 11:30. I'm working out the details. I'm hoping to set an actual time. So if we want to set it in the afternoon to say, 3 o'clock hour or 2 o'clock hour, this is when the item is going to be brought up. It helps for public comment. It helps, of course, we value your time. We don't want you to lose an entire day just waiting around. That's part of my job. But that's try to smooth out the process.
Just a couple of questions for clarification, Andrew. On subdivisions that are, have been constructed, let's say they're started on a preliminary plat, but the final plat's not done because all the improvements aren't done, or you're not at 75%. Maybe it's the I don't know if it's RS6 or 4.5 behind Carroll High School, but sure, smaller lots. If this overlay district gets dropped down on it, what happens to those lots where the plat has not been finalized?
Where a plat has not been submitted, and that's the key phrase. So
is it preliminary plat or final plat?
Any type of plat that has been submitted under the Texas vesting statute is protected. I'm sure Buck will correct me if I'm wrong, but it is the minute you submit, you are showing intent, and therefore it is now a vested project. even if you're not recorded yet, or even if you're in the preliminary phase, you have submitted an application showing intent. Now, your application can still expire, and that's a whole other discussion, but that's why you'll see like Shannon Estates was on tonight. Those folks chose to submit earlier as much as they could, knowing that there was an ordinance coming forward. And we anticipated that. We knew that there was going to be a few that trickled in right under the wire before the ordinance passes. I'm sure things will change with the UDC amendments. You'll see a bunch of submittals right before those text amendments take place. And it's just the natural process. As any code updates, you're going to have folks submit right before to take advantage of vesting. That's just business.
So this whole idea of, kind of what's come out in the last 6 months on this, I forget what you call it, a master plat for a whole thing, depending on the acreage.
Yes, sir.
Some of these projects may have only been submitted as a 5-acre deal or 10-acre, whatever it is, but the other property was not included in a master plat. So there's no intent because they just haven't gotten to that phase of development.
Correct.
All that property based on this overlay district, they're going to lose that zoning, and then you're going to have a density that's whatever the 1 or 2 per acre, depending upon where it is, correct?
Essentially, when you're going to cross a threshold of when the overlay becomes effective. Now, as we've mentioned, and we mentioned it during our road show, is that there will be a window period for folks to still apply for a change of zoning after the ordinance is adopted, or when the ordinance is adopted. There will still be a window period for folks to come in, because we know there's still going to be kind of an idea of, okay, what can I do now on my property? Or I had this vision of building X and now I don't think I can. They're still free to submit. We will still have that discussion with the Navy. That still goes through the process of having a free change of zoning without any cost to them. And that is to, again, alleviate fears that, I'm going to lose my property ability, my buildable ability.
But
I think that was in the ordinance, and it's a 6-month window, I believe.
Yes, ma'am.
I guess the other things from a practical standpoint, and where I'm concerned in this, and again, housing affordability is a big problem in our community. But, I look at things like the noise requirement, and if I'm a builder building a house, does our existing code even cover, how you would even build to comply with the noise requirements? Because what my concern is the stuff's not properly in the code. How is the city going to know? Because what I figure is going to happen is you're going to say, well, go to an engineer and get them to certify that you meet the noise requirement. And so guess what? That's going to be $400 or $500 for the builder to get that letter. Now you have other things like the height requirement, which has a huge swath. That's a whole area of town. And so, there's no exclusions for, maybe you only have to do that on buildings over 150 feet high or whatever. But to me, that's going to be another letter the builder has to get, or, the lighting requirement certifying that whatever it is, 2 candle feet, which is basically a 1-watt light bulb. How is this going to get executed, I guess?
All excellent questions. So, much like the tree ordinance, we learn more in implementation than anything, and how enforcement occurs. So, for instance, with lighting, today, as I review plans for lighting, I rely on either photometrics, which is submitted along with most of your lighting plans, which identify any bleed onto adjoining properties. Now, you may have some instances where it becomes a call of the reviewer, meaning I've seen a few plans to where they're at 1.2 candle feet over the line. Am I really going to penalize them for 0.2 feet? And Nina will cover her ears. Sometimes I don't, because the reality is those downcast fixtures that they'll put around the actual light source will compensate for that 0.02 that they're over the line. So it becomes more of an exercise in enforcement of understanding what is the actual risk at hand, and that's just lighting as an example.
But again, on a residential...
Also, on the noise, just
Yeah.
to interject, the noise contour affects very few properties.
Correct.
It's primarily
Scroll
over the
down.
military installation, so if we could pull that one up.
The kind of copper color line, this entire site that you'll see on the screen is a bird sanctuary. This is zone commercial. This is part of the sanctuary that's also zoned commercial. There are no true single-family residences. The only true single-family residence that's outside of property, which it's hard to see, kind of a gray, let me zoom in, a grayish line. This gray line here is owned by the U.S. government. So this small portion of property is technically in the zone where their single-family home has been built here. So
I'm more worried about the Cabinets area than I am the.
Cabinets, 100% of the noise contour is inside of the installation itself.
Okay.
No part of the noise contour bleeds outside of the actual installation.
How about the light requirement?
The light requirements, we'll go back to that. And keep in mind is that the lighting requirements are exactly what they are today. They exist in the UDC. It is nothing extra. And where lighting will come into play is in this area. Now, what sounds like this extra regulation, I can tell you the lighting requirement we're placing here is the exact same lighting requirement that's in the UDC just outside of the line.
But is it, because I don't think the lighting requirement on the residential side, you don't have to submit a lighting plan or kind of what you were referencing. So is that going to change as it relates to residential construction?
It is exactly the same. And the reason I say it's exactly the same is across the board, the UDC says no light fixture can be upward casting. Whether it's residential, commercial, industrial, all of them have to be downcast. All of them, through use of typical residential fixtures, have a downward type of sconce designed to it. So no matter what, it is meeting the code requirement of having downcast light. And there is no way anyone's putting a spotlight. I mean, I'm sure there's somebody having a spotlight on top of their house. At that point, it's usually a discussion between neighbors, but
it's not, you don't anticipate there being any kind of new red tape as far as the regular run-of-the-mill?
No, we're not.
How about on the noise requirement? How's that going to get impacted over at Cabinets?
Noise requirement, it's entirely inside the installation, so we'll move up to that layer. I think we actually made one because it's one small, and I'll show a drawing of what that looks like. So the level above the 65 decibel is a bubble like this. That's it. It doesn't leave the gray area of the installation. So there is no extra noise requirement outside of Cabinets Field.
Okay. I'm not sure who's.
I have a good.
Thanks. My apologies. It's popping up as Councilman Hunter, so I'm not sure who.
Yes, sir.
Could you go back to the addition about the drive-through and the
Yes,
the
sure.
dining? With no dining facilities, so would Chick-Fil-A count as because it has some sort of dining facility? Would that?
Chick-fil-A, and that's a great point you brought up. So in Vegas, there is a kind of a dueling competition right now between Chick-fil-A and Taco Bell of who can have the most efficient to-go only business. I think Taco Bell has 10 drive-through lanes, and it's an automated system in which you can see your order moving down a belt and delivered to your car. So it has zero on-site dining. It is entirely to-go curbside service. Chick-fil-A is doing something similar, where you can either put, just as you do today on your app, you pull up to the curbside, they bring your order out, you are not eating on site.
Okay, but if they did decide to build their standard, I guess I call it the regular Chick-fil-A with the on-site dining,
it would not be allowed to have indoor outdoor dining. The jury's still kind of out on how Sonic fits into the picture because they may have a picnic table, but they're technically curbside. I think it would be the car wouldn't sit for too long. It would just be a drive-through lane and you're picking up rather than traditional Sonic where you're parking and consuming. Granted, that's 20 cars and it's popular in the evening hours. There are no nighttime missions through Cabinets but that's a longer story before I say too much.
I got you. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Zarguni?
Thank you. I have a few questions to ask. So
Sure.
My first question starts with public input. So from hearing from you, I feel that public had a great opportunity or great chance to hear the concerns or new plans.
Yes,
You feel confident that-
we went to the people rather than
Okay.
having the people come to us.
So the meeting that we're having with the city council on August 9th, I'm assuming there will be a motion or there will be an action taking place that day with the council, right?
Correct. It would be a recommendation by this body, and then ultimately,
Okay.
motion by the council.
Is public welcome to that?
Absolutely. It's still open city council meeting, just as regular business.
So it will be encouraged that we can encourage the public to come in and hear it?
Absolutely, most definitely.
Okay. So to the Chairman Table question regarding the plat. So you mentioned with the submittal of the plat, the owners of the property kind of don't have to deal with the overlay issue in terms of usage. Am I correct?
Once you submit a plat, that whatever your plat design is what's vested. Now,
Regardless if the plat has been approved or not approved or anything.
it is to show intent of development, so that the idea, now, if you designed a 2 units an acre, then that's what you'll be subject to. So it is based on the submittal itself.
Okay, so basically, like, as we speak right now on a 10-acre tract on the zone 4.5 acre, right? The owner will usually get about 45, 50 lots. With a change of this ordinance happening, I think is 1 or 2 lots per acre.
2 units per acre.
Correct.
And if you're in the APZ2, and that's the catch. 1, you have to be residentially zoned, of course, just to allow residences. But 2, if you're in the APZ2, it's 2 units per acre would be the allowance.
So what happens to a property that is not currently zoned residential, that they want to downzone it, like, because I know this issue or similar issues like this could come up, that there may be a higher zoning or industrial zoning, that they want to change it to a residential zoning. If this ordinance has taken effect, are they subject to follow the new guideline? Because I heard something about giving
Sure.
them a 6 months time frame or.
Any change of zoning would have to go through the process, have
Sure.
a staff recommendation. This body would give a recommendation. So like with every staff report, you'll see comments from multiple plans, consistency with the requested rezoning, meaning we double check future land use. We would look at the MCAOD. We would look at infrastructure. Are they compatible with multiple plans? But of course, this would take center stage. If you're within the overlay area, is your proposed use compatible?
So again, just to make sure I'm clarifying my question, assuming, let's say, the commission and everyone has approved the zoning to RS 4.5, usually they would get 4.5 lots per acre, right? But if they are in the overlay section, that would limit them to 1 or 2 lots
To
per
2
acre,
units per acre. If they're in APZ2, it would be 2 units per acre.
even though they have a zoning of RS 4.5.
Correct.
You follow where I'm going with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just want to make sure. I had another question. Mr. Chair talked about the height and light, and in terms of mainly apartment complexes, or talk about it, please explain to me how this going to be enforced again, that the height restrictions and all
Sure.
that will be enforced, because I can see this become an.
So the question is going to round about what are called imaginary surfaces, and that is the slope in which flights are arriving or departing a particular runway. Now, as you'll see, this is going up all the way to an altitude of 400 feet. Now, granted, your most restrictive areas are at the ends of the runway, which are owned by the federal government, as it is today. Those are your clear zones, which means those are the areas that you're going to have the most restrictive elevation, usually at about 75, 100 feet, because it is on that pattern of ascension. So that is why, unless you're developing a building 10, 15 plus stories high, are you really going to get into an area that the FAA has to sign off? Now, granted, anything over, I believe, 200 feet has to be signed off by the FAA anyway. So that's one thing that the Navy always emphasized, is that no matter what, even if you're using a crane, the FAA has to sign off on it just for construction, even if it's not a permanent structure. So I think that discussion is still going to continue forward with recommending that folks talk to the local FAA office. But 2, unless you're getting into 10, 12 stories, you're not going to, your 3-story apartment complex potentially is not going to be negatively affected by the height restrictions.
Okay,
That's mostly to target cell towers and antennas, radio.
gotcha. Thank you.
Yes, sir. The purpose of the joint meeting is a couple of factors. One, it's definitely the most expeditious route to take. That's it's just a a plus. Two, the UDC says we have an opportunity that when we rezone, which is exactly what we're doing by applying an overlay, when it crosses 10 parcels of land, you can either go through a very long process of multiple notices, and one other option is the council can set the type of notice, which instead of sending out 1,500 mail-out notices, you can post it in the paper. We have a couple of months of time now that we've been putting the message out to the public, and have a joint meeting, so you kind of take care of it in one fell swoop.
How many prospects fall in that talking about that are not currently zoned, or is it a lot of acreage in there?
And that's a good question. So when the data came out of, and I kind of broke down each field between Waldron and Cabinets, ironically, Waldron had more residential property around in the Cabinets. Cabinets has far majority of light industrial zoning because of the way out Weber complex. The area that's in between the two, former and current Carroll site is actually zoned industrial next to Most Precious Blood. The properties that are zoned single family in Flower Bluff around Waldron are very small parcels. They're all less than an acre. So when you add them up, there's maybe 20 acres of residential property, but they're on very small individual parcels of land. And when you boil down to even another step of how many of those are currently land used as vacant, meaning there is nothing on it, could be an ag use, you're talking about a handful of parcels. So at the end of the day, yes, you have to take step and step and step, but when you look at the hard data, the numbers really aren't there that there's going to be this major shift in loss of rights. No, not that. Correct. What you have to keep in mind is the area, and it's kind of helpful with the map. I should probably do that first. Is, as I'm sure all of you are aware, the biggest problem on the western part of Flower Bluff is access to wastewater. In the state of Texas, you must have a half acre of land in order to qualify for a septic tank at a bare minimum. So the vast majority of vacant areas in this area, the property that's already been built on to its most capability, that's residential, that has access to wastewater underground, is located on the right-hand side of the screen. So again, going back to, you have to have a minimum of a half acre, which is the very density that APZ2 promotes. So no matter what, just to get a septic tank, half an acre, in order to be compliant with APZ2, those are half acre lots. So it balances itself as much as, again, it seems like there's this land grab or people are losing rights. In reality, it's not happening. You're having to build a half an acre anyway just to have wastewater. Yes. At the end of the day, no matter what, you can always build, as long as your base zoning, of course, allows it, you can always build a single-family home. So regardless if you have 100% loss, which God forbid that never happens, you're still entitled to build a single-family home. So that question about nonconformities actually is solved by just allowing the use.
Is Saratoga APZ2?
There is a portion of Saratoga, yes, under APZ2. Let's see, that is still... There we go. And so your APZ2 is the portion of the blue line. There we go. The dark pink is your APZ2. So there are small patches of Saratoga here and here that are within. There's Valera at Weber and Saratoga, which is right about there. There is a complex in development, and then before you hit CCISD, there's Most Precious Blood, along with, a vacant parcel. Shannon Estates was actually here what we discussed tonight, so it's hovering on the edge. That was one of the plats that came through tonight. That's Shannon Estates, right.
Which I'm certain, at least, or assuming that that's a reason that they submitted the plot.
It's what I never want to accuse, that's the only reason. I'm sure it's, we've kind of been internally talking about it, the inflation rate and things, cost of building materials. Would we see a slowdown in plats? That's kind of been the question on everybody's mind internally. We have not. There was one plat cycle where we saw 3 plats, but this most recent submittal of future plats is at 12. So it is not slowing down. And so I don't like to think it's the only reason that someone submitted, but I think it was in the natural process as Bridges Mills 3, which is the sister project, just completed their plating process. It's just the natural extension.
That one is under construction.
Yes, sir.
In reality, they didn't need to. They're gonna have actually 6 months after this.
A window for potential rezoning.
So how does that work? If that proposed would happen like that, the overlay have still 6 months to come in?
We left a window open for them to come in and apply for a rezoning. So
They will get it before overlay?
Well, no, the 6 months is to allow them to apply for a rezoning that's consistent with the overlay. Yeah, free of charge.
Any other questions? Okay,
Okay, well, we'll see you August the 9th.
very good. Nina, do we have a director's report?
No report.
Any future agenda items? Okay, we will adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you.